thank you so much for dedicating your time on this Wednesday for you to join us at the Montana Mountaineering Association. We're so appreciative of Joe's time for dedicating that to us. It isn't, in fact, a way of donation, because we use this speaker series as a way to, kind of echo the community, learn, educate, utilize the mentors of our community for our betterment, and being safer and more educated climbers and mentors ourselves. So, for those, if this is your first time joining us, the Montana Mountaineering Association is a nonprofit. We would be remiss to not mention that and not mention our financial plans and goals for next year. We will be having, a fundraiser. We're having a fundraiser that's going on right now that we'd love you to tune into. It's on our social media. You can see that we are utilizing artists, local community members, etc., for raffles and donations if you donate to the Montana Mountaineering Association. And furthermore, for anyone who's joining us tonight, you're all enrolled in Uphill Pursuits for a raffle for a $50 gift card. So we're so grateful for their sponsorship at Uphill. If you haven't been to Uphill Pursuits in Bozeman, it is really an outstanding store for mountaineering, alpinism, ski, mountaineering, etc. The brands, the equipment, and the prices that they have there are, you really can't find it anywhere else in Bozeman. So it's a tremendous place for you to go visit locally and support locally. But without further ado, for our 9th month of the Montana Mountaineering Speaker Series, we are so grateful to have Joe Josephson to join us. And, when we first started this was obviously one of the people in Bozeman that we knew that we wanted to or needed to have on this series to really, if the series was to have any reputation at all or have any legs of bringing on interesting people, we had to bring on JoJo. But, we also wanted to make sure that we had our legs underneath us and we kind of understood what the community wanted from this presentation, et cetera. So we wanted to make sure that Joe was present with us, in the summer, and will also probably be joining us in the fall another time to be, kind of elucidate on a topic a little deeper, maybe the Canadian Rockies, et cetera. But, we are so grateful to have Joe. So Joe, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for dedicating your time to the speaker series and MMA for tonight.
Yeah, well, thanks, Chad. I really appreciate that. And I just want to acknowledge Montana Mountaineering Association. They've, I've been kind of aware of their activities since I moved back to Montana in 1998, and been a big fan, since then, and really love what you guys are doing. I really applaud you, Chad. I haven't seen all of the speaker series to date, but I think you're doing a great job. You prepare well, great questions. So it's been fabulous addition to the community. And I really encourage everyone to support MMA and the junior mountaineering team in particular, which I think is just brilliant. So I'll be donating to your fundraiser here this month. So I appreciate that. And I just want to say I'm coming here from Bozeman, Montana, which is indigenous home to many cultures. It's an interesting place because it was always considered a coming together area. And I just want to read something about it from my book, House of Hyalite, which I'll be donating some to the as part of that raffle at the end. But Bozeman here has been a common hunting ground for many tribes from across the region. And long before all the forts and failed treaties that happened here, there was a particularly bloody battle in antiquity between a couple tribes. No one really knew why. It didn't make sense. And one day, a spirit, right after the battle, a spirit maiden appeared, this, as the story goes, in Bridger Canyon, right near the M, where the M is today, and stood on a rock, which is no longer there. But anyway, stood on this rock and said, "This forever shall be a valley of peace," and called it the Valley of Flowers. And so that's where I'm coming from. But I just wanted to acknowledge those people that have been here and recreated and lived here long before any of us were climbing. We ever thought about climbing. Most of the first ascents of peaks in this area were done long before any of us were here. So thanks for indulging me on that. But I look forward to people's questions. Like Chad and I, when we met a couple weeks ago, we talked about a whole host of things. I don't actually talk about climbing much. I write books and articles now and again. I used to do more, but and I'll maybe share a little bit more about that at the end. But so it's fun for me. So I may get a little, down some rabbit holes and some good stories that are pretty fun. But please, I'd love it for the participants or the viewers to help drive some of that. So, and Chad has my full permission to interrupt me in my mansplaining and just say, hey, there's this great question, or shut up and let's move on. So fair warning. So I look forward to everyone's questions. And I pulled up a few photos. I'm not a fancy AV guy. I don't have like some feature film to show or anything, but I have a couple old slideshows, one from on PowerPoint, one from one of my 7 expeditions in the Yukon to Mount Logan area, and then another one I did at the Vancouver Film Festival in 05 or so. These are both around that era. That includes some Beartooth, Canada, Cody, a bunch of stuff. So if it works out, if people want to see a photo or two from a story that's easy for me to pull up, I might share my screen. So bear with us as we go through that. But
yeah, so just to echo what Joe says, that comment section in the Facebook Live is for a way for you to also steer the conversation. If you want to spend a little bit more time on the topic, let us know. But I think that most people who are on this webinar, video podcast, whatever you may call it tonight, know exactly who you are, right? For those who don't, a really short and unfair summation of JoJo is kind of just an inspiring first ascensionist, author of climbing books from Waterfall Ice in the Canadian Rockies to Winter Dance to House of Hyalite, which we are, as JoJo said, will be part of a 3-person raffle at the end of this call. But what many people may not know is your origin story, your genesis, where you're from. And I think it's, we would be remiss not to hear that, because I think that there is kind of a big leap for those who don't know, coming from Big Timber, Montana to, the Canadian Rockies at your age. And when you did. So, if you could, like we would ask those in Eastern Canada, how did you avoid hockey? How did you avoid football in Big Timber growing up? And tell us a little bit about growing up.
Good. Well, so yeah, I like to say that I was born in Big Timber, but raised in the Beartooths. My dad's family and his family before that, and many generations, were from Billings area, and my mom was from the Flathead. So a lot of history in the area. And my great grandfather was one of the originators of the East Rosebud Lake sort of association, where the cabin is. So I grew up at a cabin in East Rosebud Lake. I'm super privileged to have done that and have that opportunity. And so I'd spend all my summers there. My aunt and uncle were teachers, and my grandmother, Harriet, she didn't like to be called grandmother, so we all called her Harriet. And she was an amazing woman. She was a photographer. All these books behind me are all photos that she took that I'm busy archiving of the Beartooths in the 40s and the 30s, 40s, 50s, before his wilderness. So I have this strong connection to history and the Beartooths, really. And so I would just spend my whole summers up there. And I remember, I stopped playing baseball, softball when I was in Little League, because I was I sucked, and I'd rather be at the cabin. And so I was just slowly getting into just more and more hiking. I grew up fishing there, and then I would just go to these remote lakes like Froze to Death Lake or Arch Lake or wherever, Snow Lake, and off trail and go fishing. But then I'd go over the mountains, in between. And before long, I just stopped fishing and just going over the mountains. And I slowly just got more and more interested in climbing. And I didn't know any climbers. I didn't know climbing shops existed. I had no idea there was magazines. There was a alpine club. I knew none of that. There was this legendary snowstorm in July one year in the 70s. I remember it was like a foot of snow showed up at East Rosebud Lake in July 4th weekend. And people still talk about it, today. And years later, 30, well, more than that, but many years later, I got to know Pat Callis, reasonably well enough. And in the Dirty Socks Club. And there's a legendary story in the Dirty Socks Club of Pat doing maybe the first attempt or one of the first, maybe the first ascent. I don't know where it fell in climbing the doublet, which is this major wall. There's this major snowstorm, that was part of the climbing lore around here. And I realized, wow, I was probably this little kid walking by Pat Callis and Chad Chadwick and Jack Tackle, on the trail. I had no idea who they were, what they were doing. I knew I wanted to know more about climbing, but I had no idea that people like that existed. The only climbers I knew about were John Roskelly and Jeff Lowe and a little bit, and Reinhold Messner, because they're the ones who were in Outside Magazine and National Geographic. I mean, that's all I knew about climbing. And so I just was sort of hungry for it and wanted to learn more. And I was getting more and more into the mountains and just traveling around. And I have to say, I basically knew the maps to the Beartooths, to the entire Beartooth. I got to, studied the maps, and I really learned my mountain sense in that era. And I think that's been my best climbing skill. I'm not very strong. I got really lucky to be in the right place at the right time to do some really cool routes. But I think my if I had to say I had one skill in climbing, it's mountain sense. And that was just earned through wandering around the Beartooths with a map, figuring out how do I get from here to there without someone telling me how to do it. Right. And I think that skill is slowly getting lost because people just go to Facebook and go, how do I get there? Or, guidebooks to some degree, but guidebooks, I think, fall in that category of maps. You can study them and learn and read between the lines and then evolve and learn how to figure it out for yourself. So anyway, I was just doing all of that. And then you asked about football. So my freshman year of high school, I was supposed to leave the cabin 2 or 3 weeks early from before school started to start practice, right? Football practice. And it's 150 people, maybe 150 in my 4-year high school, and 90% of the boys played football, kind of thing. And I remember it to this day. It's one of those decisions in your life that you make that fundamentally changes your trajectory. And I remember sitting there at the cabin. I remember exactly where it was, and it was like mom and dad were headed home from the weekend. They were coming back on Labor Day, but I could either go home with them now or they could pick me up on Labor Day. But I would go and start school right after that. But I would basically say no to football, and I just said no. I'm staying here for another 2 weeks. Screw it. I don't want to leave the Beartooths. And it was just like I made it kind of like that. I mean, it was I never expected that I wouldn't play football until that moment.
Yeah.
And
how did that affect you in a town of like Big Timber, being one of the,
it was all right. I mean, at the time I thought it was horrible,
yeah.
And I got bullied and teased a little bit, but I was pretty benign. I just, I got along with everybody for the most part. And I was a runner and a track guy and played a little basketball. So, I had enough athletic chops to get along, but, it was a great place to grow up. Yeah, I just was always sort of interested in doing my own thing, and I kind of took to the track thing, and I was a one-man cross-country squad. They didn't have cross-country. So, I just kind of started doing my own thing, but I still didn't know anything about climbing. And so I think that climbing spirit, that a lot of climbers have gravitated towards, it's kind of legendary, it's kind of just the classic climber story. And I was searching for that somewhere, somehow. And I sort of knew that climbing was something that might scratch that itch, but I didn't know anything about it. So finally, a guy named Dr. Bruce Anderson. He was another cabin owner. He was a old school. He was in the 10th Army Division or something. He took me climbing for the first time on some slabby, licheny rocks around East Rosebud, and it started raining, and we had to wrap off this slick slab in the rain. And he taught me how to coil a rope and all these things. And then he taught me one thing that I've continued to teach throughout is never lose your fear, is what he said. And I've and it's not like the, oh, I'm afraid kind of thing like this, but it's more the contemplating where you're at, always being aware, always being situationally aware, thinking about what you do. And I swear to this day, it's saved my life so many times. But more importantly, what it's done is it's made climbing at any level, it doesn't matter whether it's the easiest route or the hardest, I'm just really kind of engaged. It's all about the systems you're doing, how you can be efficient, thinking about where you're at. Is this ledge that I'm going to be on going to fall off the mountain? You know,
Yeah.
like we've all had friends that have had that happen, you know, and I'm not saying I can't stop that from happening, but I'm always thinking about those sorts of things. And then, so it makes the climbing more intellectually and emotionally interesting to me. And it's not about how hard it is. I've, you know, I like to say, I used to, in ice climbing in my high water mark, I used to say, you know, I'm not, everyone's like, I want to lead that pitch. I want to lead the crux, you know, flip for it, you know, screw you. I'm going to, you know, flip someone off. Screw you. I'm going to lead it. That's the classic running joke. But if one of my partners ever said, yeah, I want to lead that pitch, I was like, okay, great. Let's figure out how to organize the swapping.
Yeah, if you
they want to do it, because the way my attitude was always, I'm going to get plenty of those pitches on my own. I don't need to go looking for them. You know,
but fill us in with the gap in between you doing some rainy slabs in East Rosebud and you getting those pitches on your own.
So I'll try to fast forward here a little bit.
Oh no, I mean we have time. We
friend of mine,
with Odenbeck and Kingsbury, we broke it into two, so we have the time.
Well, those guys are a tough act to follow. So this guy, Steve Patton, who is from Billings, who I knew, had a cabin down the canyon. He was a climber. He was going to school here at MSU. He's mostly a ridge rat, you know, he was like skier from the ridge and stuff, but he'd done some climbing. And he took me climbing for the first time. I think it was the summer of my senior year. I was working at the Stillwater mine as a summer job. And I drove over here to Bozeman and we went climbing. And it was the first time I did really climbing. Like Dr. Anderson was like 2 years before, or maybe more, you know. So I had this, you know, I had just a taste.
Yep.
I did my whistle, and then Steve was like the first time I ever actually went cragging with someone.
Nice.
And my first lead ever, my first real rock climb ever after that. I think we must have done something else at Practice Rock. He must have led something, but I know the second climb we did was I led the fiver on the left there on the north side.
Yep.
Awkward AF, right? And I had tri-cams that I didn't know how to use, so I'm putting them in like nuts, slotting them in, and I let it. And there's no, like, I don't remember what the anchor was. It's probably pitons, you know, not like bolts or chains that they have now. And I was like, okay, this is what you do. I mean, I'm doing it. And then the next day we went out to the Hyalite Canyon and we went up Pineapple Thunder Pussy, which is, you know, pretty stout 5'9", pretty solid anyway. And I had this brand new rope. I just like bought this pink 11 mil rope from REI, like mail order, you know. I was like, I just went and bought some stuff, like 10 carabiners and a rope. I think that's in a harness. That's all I had. And a Wild Things pack that I still have. Actually, I carry my chainsaw around in it. But anyway, that was the only gear I had. So Steve goes up, and I don't know, we must have been on the first pitch. I don't remember, but he took a 30-footer.
Whoa.
There was a bunch of trees, you know, my memory is all those trees are gone now, I think, but he fell on a hex. So those of you that are canyon rats probably know exactly where that might be, but or my memory's on. But it's like, okay, well, I'm going to try it. I can lead now. So I went up there and I got about 30 feet above his piece. And I realized right then and there, I was in over my head.
Oh no.
And so I down climbed. I down climbed to the piece, but then I down climbed the whole pitch, taking the gear out as I went. So I was I down let it basically, I guess.
Yep.
The to call it. It didn't occur to me that you would lower off or leave something. And what you do is that's what you do.
Yeah.
That's what climbing was for me and for us. So I think that really cemented my ethic or my approach to climbing. And then I went off to college, U of M, Missoula, and I was in physics, and I was really bad at that because I couldn't do the math and didn't know what I wanted to do. And a good friend of mine who was on the track team with me Rob Motzel from Columbia Falls had dropped out to go be a ski bum in Big Mountain. And he lives in Jackson now. Has been there forever. I'm an institution there now, but he, great guy. And he came back to campus one year, and I remember, again, this is one of those moments, right, where you make a decision in your life. Yep. I remember we're right there on the square in the middle by the grizzly statue. I go, Rob, how's it going? What you doing? He's telling me about his winter and all the skiing he did. He says, yeah, I met this guy. He has this way of like bobbing his head, kind of hippie style. And he goes, yeah, I met this guy from Canada. He's like, he studied at this university and now he studies avalanches in Western Canada. It's really cool. And I'm like, well, that sounds kind of interesting. And so I went to the university library and I got out the microfiche because that's what it was back then. This is 1987. And I didn't like physics either because back then everyone just made bombs for Star Wars and Reagan, I wasn't into that. So I found the University of Calgary in this outdoor pursuits program. It was like this special program, the only one of its kind, maybe in the world. It was run by this famous ice climber named Bill March, who's from Scotland. He was the first person in Scotland to ever front point back in the early 60s, and written a couple of famous books, and some other famous Canadian climbers, Murray Toft, guides were part of it all. And really limited numbers and everything. I didn't know much. I didn't know anything about ice climbing. I kind of wanted to ice climb. Chris Apple, who some people might know from here in town, he's a physical therapist. He was from Shepherd, and we ran track against each other in high school and played basketball. And he was at U of M. And I remember being in his dorm room once going like, man, ice climbing, what's that like? What's that like? He'd climb like Rock Creek Falls or something like that, which is like this grade 2 down on the Beartooth Highway. And one of the earliest climbs in Montana, actually. I'm looking at a photo of it right here of Chad Chadwick doing French technique on it. But anyway, he's like, oh, why would you want to do that? Christian is a really good rock climber, was then and is now. And he's like, why would you want to ice climb? You're just cold, wet, and mortally frightening. I was like, no, I think I'd really like that. I had no reason to know why.
It's cold, wet, and mortally frightening. And you're like, that, but that's so good. Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, I found out about this college and I applied. I didn't tell my parents. When I graduated high school, I really wanted to go out of state. I was like, I got to get out of Montana or Big Timber or whatever. As good as I love Montana now, but at the time I was like a lot of teenagers, like get the hell out. But we couldn't afford it. I had 2 brothers in college, and there's U of M was pretty cheap for, in state and everything. So by the time 2 years later, they were both graduated, and I didn't think my parents were going to go for it. And they just said, yeah, sounds great. And it actually ended up being cheaper, the exchange rate at the time. So I loaded up my truck and a little S10, Chevy S10 red thing, a little camper. And I drove to Canada. I mean, I'd never been, besides the trip to DC when we were kids, I'd never been, in a city bigger than Missoula or Billings, Great Falls, I guess, but at the time. But anyway, and I had no idea the Canadian Rockies were the Mecca and the Medina of ice climbing. I had no idea. I didn't know anything about it. I just wanted to do this outdoor pursuits program, someplace new, and follow this.
I think that's like so important to repeat, that you did not know what. No, yeah, and then it's just like it's a matter of years, and then waterfall ice. So
that was 87. So I published
waterfall ice in 94. Life decision, deciding to go there. So the first was not going to football camp, and then the second was picking that school happenstance.
Well, it wasn't happenstance. I mean, it had this unique program that I'd gotten this. If I'd been 2 minutes later and not run into Rob on campus and heard about that program and looked it up, I would have never known about it. No idea.
That's some Back to the Future
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah. 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 If Biff had bumped into me on the way there, I would have, who knows?
Someone else would have written the book.
What's that?
Someone else would have written the book.
Well, there was a book. There were two books, actually. Albie Soule had written two versions of Waterfall Ice. And his second one had just come out because Waterfall Ice had just gone through kind of the Terminator had been climbed for the first time. Riptide had been climbed for the first time. And these were the hardest ice climbs in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And this journal called Polar Circus had come out with Dave Cheeseman was part of it. And it was like this amazing, there's only 2 copies of it. And it was like Alpinist before there was Alpinist, and it is amazing. And maybe I'll share that with people someday. But so there was just this really cool imagery and these amazing, I was like, wow, what are these? And then all my classmates were, obviously they knew more about it. Most of them, they're all from Canada. There was one Australian, and they were all like me. They were like, raft guy, they grew up rafting or canoeing in Eastern Canada, a little bit of climbing. They were all like just general outdoors people that were just rabid about it. And so we all just started hiking and climbing and, kayaking and canoeing and stuff like that, just like crazy. And I bought like some used gear. I bought this low Big Bird, which was like 59 centimeters. I think it was like this big, had a tube pick on it and a tube adze.
Big
and
tube adze, straight shaft
leashes with just like the leashes were just webbing that you stuck your hand in and you wrapped it hard enough until it pushed down, and then you grab the tool. That was it. And then you could unravel it to take another tool you had on your harness out to put the ice screws in. That took about 15 minutes to get in every time.
It's like wrapping and unwrapping boxing gloves while climbing.
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah.
And I did it all, I didn't wear gloves ice climbing until 1992. So the first 5 years I just wore Doc Steen mitts. That's all I wore. And the only reason I wore gloves is because we were going to do the first ascent of Sea of Vapors, and I figured I needed something with a little more dexterity.
And what were your first boots?
I bought a pair of Castingers. I don't know what the model was, but they actually had a sole on the end. They're double boot, and they had a separate Vibram sole on the inside boot. So you could take it out, walk around Everest Base Camp or wherever the hell you might be, and and then put it in the plastic boot. And they actually, the first ice climb, my buddy Alex Taylor took me on. He's still one of my best friends today. We skied into this thing. And that was the other thing. Back then, you had to worry about your tools and your crampons and your boots and everything, but you also had to figure out your alpine touring gear. What alpine touring kit could you cobble together that your climbing boots would fit into? Silverettas or Emerys or whatever, these, European brands, typically in Canada, from Canada. Anyway, so we skied into Bow Falls, which is this pretty easy climb. Doesn't have much avalanche hazard, if any, maybe some on the approach. But anyway, Alex broke his boot. It was so cold. It was like -20 or -30 or something like that. And the shell of his Koflak boot broke. And so we bailed. And then by the time I think we finished the climb, and then we walked down. And then by the time we got back, my boot was broken too, cracked open the front of it. So then I bought a pair of Galibier Super Guides, which are a leather single boot with a wooden shank.
Wow.
I mean, I climbed the Grand Central Couloir in those things, like whenever I needed, like I knew the boot needed to work. That's what I went with, So anyway, that started my ice climbing. And then what really cemented it was 87, 88, the winter of 87, 88. And in the Canadian Rockies scene, there was all these, I was getting to know some of those people, Jeff Marshall and a bunch of folks, Carl Nagy, who was one of my early mentors, rest in peace. The Calgary Mountain Club, they were sort of like the dirt, like equivalent of the Dirty Socks Club up there, kind of old renegade Brits and stuff. So I was getting to know them a little bit, but the scene was pretty suppressed, for lack of a better word. I mean, it was really there've been some real tragedies recently, right before I got there. Dave Cheeseman had died on Mount Logan. Brian Wallace, this rock climber, died on this alpine rock climb above Canmore during this freak tornado, basically, that came through Calgary, the storm. And then Ian Bolt and Dan Guthrie died on Mount Foraker in Alaska. And so the community was like reeling from all of that. It was big. It was big. And so alpine climbing, ice climbing, and Barry Blanchard, who's a dear friend of mine, a lot of people know now, he, who I got to know later, but he was off doing Everest and he was focused on the Himalayas and a bunch of other stuff. So the ice climbing scene really wasn't that active, really, for lack of a better word. And the gear sucked. I mean, you heard some of those stories, right? So, it just wasn't really that dynamic. But I started climbing and I loved it. And I had this crappy old gear that I bought secondhand at the used gear sale. And then, so in 1988 was that winter into the new year, it was the Olympics. Remember, the Olympics were in Calgary in 1988. And so the whole campus was shut down. There were 2 weeks where campus got shut down. And all my friends were going to Joshua Tree. They were just gone. And I remember my dad, I see my dad's watching now. I remember calling up mom and dad in Big Timber and say, I really want to go to Joshua Tree. I didn't have any money or something. I seem to remember asking for money and I didn't get it for whatever reason. And so I was, no worries, I was still in Calgary. And so I was up at the Rampart Creek Hostels and Icefields Parkway. All my friends were gone. They were out of town. And I ran into this guy from Seattle area. He worked at Boeing. I don't even remember his name. I might have it written down somewhere. I meant to look it up before this started. But anyway, we just went climbing for 2 weeks. I just ice climbed every day for 2 weeks, camped out at the Rampart Creek Hostel. And by the end of that 2 weeks, I led Carlsberg Column, which was like this standard grade 5 in the field, a beautiful route. Probably done it 10 times since my first grade 5. And everyone came back and I was all like, what'd you guys climb? Like how, they were climbing like 10 seed. And I thought that was so cool. Like, wow, it's amazing. And now all they could go is like, Joe's climbing grade 5. I wasn't even JoJo then. That nickname came later, and so by the end of that season, I took my friend Alex, who took me on my very first climb up. I led him up his first grade 5. So by the end of that season, I'd done way more ice climbing than I'd done any kind of other climbing. And so just the mold was set.
So just because, just a mass of people went to Joshua Tree, you had a lot of routes available and you had that fire,
Well, I mean, it wasn't because there weren't people around. There was just, I didn't have any partners. And so I found, and I found this guy who was on his, doing a road trip to the Canadian Rockies to go ice climbing. And for whatever reason, he didn't have a partner. And so we just went climbing.
So I didn't catch, did you mention how long it took you to do Polar Circus?
Oh, so the first year I climbed this route called Polar Circus. I actually had to talk my friend Dudley into it. He was like this guy from BC. He was in my program. I was like, Dudley, like the season, it's like the end of the year. Like, let's go to Polar Circus. Conditions are really good. And he's like, oh, I don't know. I feel like jumping a train to Vancouver for the weekend. Like he was going to just like go down to the rail yard and jump on a train. I'm like, no, dude, let's go to Polar Circus. And so we went and we climbed Polar Circus for the first time, my first season ice climbing. And I came home that summer. I was working for the Forest Service, got a job with the Forest Service up to Boulder. And, but I was in Red Lodge at some point earlier in the summer, and Rob Hart, good friend who started Crazy Creek Chairs, who big bear tooth guy, passed away on Red Lodge Mountain. But he's like, you did Polar Circus? Wow, that's amazing. Like, how many days did it take? And I go, oh, about 9 hours, car to car. Things were changing. Things were just changing. And then I think it was maybe even the next year, the first BD screws came out. The first screw that you could ever like put in without having to use a second tool. So gear rapidly got better right about that same time. And so I just sort of was in the right place at the right time.
And then talk to us a little bit about, then from there, your Yukon expeditions.
Well, this is another one of those key decisions in life, right? So my whole life growing up at East Rosebud Lake, there was this famous ranger there called Blaise Delulu. He was the wilderness ranger. He's legendary in the Forest Service. He died in 2009, Korean vet. I got to know him a little bit, and if I ever had a hero in my life, it was probably him. And he was the backcountry ranger. And I just say this now, a lot of people like to diss on the beaten path. They call it the beaten path, which I have a real hard time with that name because it disrespects Blaze, because it was actually a lot worse back then. The horse traffic and the way people camped next to the lakes and the way they overtook the meadows.
Yeah.
And my grandfather was probably one of those that did that, back in the day when they weren't thinking about it. Like, those meadows were trashed. It was like a wreck. And Blaze almost single-handedly changed like in this region, he changed the ethic. He rehabbed all those, all those meadows, planted strawberry plants. He'd rake trails. He was a phys ed teacher in Laurel. So he would do actually no trace camping as part of his phys ed class in Laurel, Montana.
Wow.
So he just helped educate. He'd track people. He'd find garbage buried at Elk Lake or Rainbow Lake, knowing that they're headed to Cook City. He'd drive around to give them a ticket on the other end, just to teach them a lesson. Nice. So that was like my hero. And so I wanted to, my dream job was to be him as a teenager. And so I got a job on the trail crew. We rebuilt a trail up Upside Down Creek trail in '88 with a big fire year. So I was working for the Big Timber District. And the next year, the ranger, Frank Cefala, called me up and said, Joe, we'd like to give you the backcountry ranger job for the Lake Plateau in the Beartooth. Like, that was my dream job, right? Here it was. It's manifesting it or whatever. But I'd been in Canada for a year, and the Arctic Institute of North America is housed there in Calgary, University of Calgary, and they do all this research on glaciers all over the planet. And there was one researcher in particular, Jerry Holdsworth, who specialized on these ice core programs on Mount Logan. They needed 4 people to be field assistants for the summer. And so me and 3 of my college classmates got selected to do that. So I had this job on the Beartooth to be the district wilderness ranger, or spend 6 weeks at 17,000 feet on Mount Logan. And so I picked the Logan thing. If I'd gone to the Forest Service, I'd probably still be working for the Forest Service. I'd be a district ranger, God knows where, or whatever. Maybe, I don't know, who knows. But so it just turned my life fully into that whole mountaineering realm. I just went like, boom. So I spent 6 weeks on Mount Logan, and then I did six more trips up there over between then 1989 and 2005. Climbed some really big routes. So that was just another one of those decisions.
Tell us some of those routes.
Well, so when we were there, I don't know if I have a photo of it, if I can share it here without.
Yeah, or in the very least, share some of the photos in between, your Canadian Rockies and the Yukon, because I'm starting to get some messages.
There's these, it's just
some young JoJo.
Yeah, Mount Logan is like one of the biggest massifs in the world in terms of just like size, and it's really glaciated. And so it's not like it's like Alaska where there's a lot of clean granite buttresses and stuff. There's a little bit of that, but not much. I'm trying to turn my mouse around. There we go. And I didn't know anything about that place either, but I just fell in love with it. Like, I mean, see if I can share this without ruining everything. Is everyone, speak up if I'm
No, you.
So you guys see this?
Yep.
So this is Mount Logan. That's the Hummingbird Ridge. This is where Dave Cheeseman died. It's never been climbed. It's never been repeated. It was climbed in the 60s. But this is from the south side. That's the summit of Mount Logan right here, actually. Right there. That's the east summit over here. But I fell in love, I went up here and I got to spend 6 weeks up here on this plateau, camping out and doing, helping this scientist do ice core stuff. And wow. So this is always, they used to land planes up here at 17,000 feet back in the day when they first started all that. So I got to know this area, and it's It's right on the Gulf of Alaska. Here's the Gulf of Alaska. So it's just this huge massif. Like this photo here, this photo is taken from 60 miles away. So I fell in love with this place, but there was this one, see if I can find a photo of it, this one peak there called King Peak. So here's the base camp, this thing right here. Fell in love. It's just, you ski up this thing called the King Trench. There's a 10,000 foot ski run here. But this King Peak had never, it was just this most spectacular peak. I was taking slide film, and I took 6 rolls of film. I think 4.5 of them were of this peak. That's the north face. So I got totally infatuated with this face. This Eiger, like this is almost 17,000 feet, and this call down here is at 14.5. So it's not huge,
Wow.
but it's, it's big. And so I was like obsessed with that for years. And, the weather is usually a lot like this, waiting to fly in. And I actually went back with Barry Blanchard later to climb that. And I took this photo on the way by. This is Mount MacArthur, which is on the opposite side of the mountain, like 30 miles away. It's the same mountain, but and I just took this photo out of the plane without thinking much about it. And the weather, though, was like this the whole time when Barry and I were there. We were actually guiding, and then we woke up one night to 7 feet of snow overnight at this call right here. And we bailed. We were going to climb King Peak after, but actually that's the summit right there, 18 miles away. But we gave up on the north face, but I skied around the corner to look at the south face, because this guy Chick Scott, a famous Canadian skier historian, kind of mentioned this big gully on the south face. So we skied around there, and I realized that that's the route to do. That is the thing. That north face is like just stupid. It's covered in seracs, and it's just like I kept trying to figure out a way to justify climbing it, and I just never could. And so I finally went back in 1997. Steve House and I went back to this thing, and we climbed it in one push. And this is the Crux. This is probably the highest grade 6 ice pitch in North America. It's like 15,500 feet. There was only like 3 hard pitches. The rest of it was pretty straightforward, but 36 hours or something like that, or 10 to 10, car to car. Not really. But so I just fell in love with the mountain. The most beautiful route I've ever done probably is this one called the East Ridge, classic mountaineering route. But as I was up there doing these things, I kept looking around, and I kept seeing other things. Like this is MacArthur, the south side of MacArthur, and there's all these beautiful ribs on them. And like this is the kind of stuff that today people ski, right? Like this is just like pretty, it's big. It's like 6,000 feet. But what I started to do is Steve and I had done that single push thing on King Peak, and he was doing more and more of that. He did a bunch of that with Twite and Backies, and I had done some others, and it was kind of the thing at the time. And they outpaced me quickly. But the way I took that was that I don't want to go do the biggest and the hardest thing, like going back to what I mentioned about my approach, right? Like yep. More intellectual and emotional.
Yep.
And so this face had been climbed a few times, and it was always done in like that 6-day slog where guys go up with these big frame packs. They spend hours digging out a platform, the weather hits, they run out of food, it turns into this epic. They got these big packs, the climbing's not hard at all, and they just like kind of suffer. And they do if they do a route at all, it's like a 6-day route. No one would ever want to repeat it, right? It's not that great. And it just doesn't have the really hard, that much anyway, super hard technical stuff that a lot of people are interested in. So what I thought, well, why not apply that single push, minimal style to these easy routes? And so looking at this face here, like, I can't remember. I think this had been climbed. One of these had been climbed, but like this hadn't been climbed. And there's all these ribs. This isn't a great photo of it, but so what I decided, oh, here's another one that's good. So you can see from the other direction, like all these ribs.
Yeah.
So why not go climb easy routes where I don't have to worry about the technical ability, but I have to put it all together, right? Like I'm going up there with no tent, no sleeping bag, just a stove and a puffy jacket. And, you know, maybe the weather will hold, maybe it won't, because the windows are so short. So this is a route that I went up there with Rich Searle and Jesse Thompson, two Bozeman guys. Rich is still here in town. We climbed this rib right here, and oh, what happened? The weather came in at one point, like right here. Here we're sitting out, some bad weather. You know, this is all we have. You know, we're sitting on our packs, and we went down, but then the weather broke again. We went back up, and you know, like just these amazing positions. There's a lot of route finding. It turns out that it's actually not straightforward or not that easy when you don't have any room for error, right?
Yep.
Like if the weather goes south, you're always thinking, where's the point of no return? Where can we get off this easily? Or is it easier to go up? You know, like there's all these decisions you have to make that to me require so much more mountain sense and emotional intelligence than just like, oh, how hard is, you know, the grade of that pulling down on that, you know, roof or whatever, like finding your way through all this stuff, you know, and across here and back up. And so, you know, they end up taking like, you know, and then you got to get off, you know, so they end up taking 24, 36 hours or something. And it takes this modest route that no one would even think twice about normally in the old school way of doing it. And it makes it this really challenging thing. So I started doing more and more of that. And I had lots of failures, like lots of things like the stove doesn't work, or you drop the pot. Like if anyone wants to know how long it takes to boil 2 liters of water on the lid of an MSR pot, I can probably at 12,000 feet, I can probably tell you. Because I've kicked the pot off the mountain, you know, before and stuff.
The lid, boiling water on the lid.
Yeah. So melting snow.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. So anyway, I fell in love with this Mount Logan area, and then I went back. Oh, that photo that I took flying by Mount MacArthur, right? That one that I took from the plane. I was like, started to get a little more interested in that. And I was like, this north face has this really stunning sort of line up the north face. And I thought, I want to go back to that. Here's the photo. This is the first photo I ever took of it. I kind of saw this, but I didn't think much of it at the time because I was probably still focused on steeper lines and, you know, whatever. And it took me a long time, the classic North Ridge route. Actually, I took a photo of that on this ridge right here that was on the cover of Alpinist magazine, but early on. But anyway, I by now I was like, oh, I want to go do that. Because that right there, my friend, take a guess how high from that Bergschrund to the top, how many feet that is?
5,000.
Anyone want to put in the comments?
Yeah, what's the
how long I
guess?
think that is? So I'll keep telling the story, and while some people like put that in there. So
Ask the
I wanted to
question
go back and do this
one
thing
more time.
What's that?
Ask the question one more time.
Right there. How long, how big, how high is that face in your opinion?
How high is the face in the photo in front of you?
Yeah. So this, I went back, drove there from Bozeman. Dave, and I met my good friend Dave Dornian in Calgary, and we went up there to do this. And we were going to do it in that single push style. And I tried it with Jesse and Rich. I wanted to do it, but we ended up just climbing the North Ridge instead, which is this beautiful route. Here's the photo that was actually in Alpinist magazine. Here's another one of it. Just this amazing arête that we did. Oh, Chad says 5,500. David Wells 7,840. I think David might have looked that up. Josh 7,500. I've always called it 8,000. Is kind of what it's a, you know, maybe it's 76, 78. I don't know, but yeah, it's around 8,000. So we drove up there in one push totally wrecked, flew in to the mountain. Here we are flying in, but right next to it was this other, right there's the face. Right here is another one, this thing, which no one even thinks twice about. These are all lines that I've picked out on that face, and when we were there, none of them were climbed.
Wow.
I picked this out later after being there, but not only one of the, we ended up climbing this one right here.
How's that
I
traverse?
kicked the stove off right about there. We
Yeah.
stopped. That's where I kicked the stove off, and we finished it, and then came down this ridge. And then we went to do, and then we went and did, so there, that's that face right there. And there's the rest of Mount Logan. So you can see that's an 8,000 foot face right there. This one is 4,500 feet right here. And there's the rest of Mount Logan. So it gives you a sense of the scale.
Oh yeah.
This place. And these two routes are right next to each other. There's the Catenary Peak, it's called. It's just a sub peak on a ridge. 4,500 foot face right there. 8,000 foot face right there. And so David and I went and climbed that thing. It was just this really fun, moderate ice route that wasn't particularly hard, but you know, the weather, we were fighting the weather, there's no place to really stop. You know, you can't really hang out anywhere on it. Really fun, sort of moderate, sort of alpine route. So made a couple of attempts. I think we got up to here. I don't know, the weather came in, we came down, went back. You know, weather was like this a lot. Or like this. This is a pretty classic photo of that time. So anyway, I got a whole hour-long slideshow about all this thing. Let me kind of fast forward. But anyway, we ended up doing that route, and then we turned our attention to the north. That's where I dropped the stove from. We ended up turning our attention to the north face of MacArthur, and I thought it was going to take about 12 hours to climb the thing. This is David on the Bergschrund, which was one of the steeper pitches, but the thing had very little snow, hardly any snow on it anywhere.
Wow.
It was just like this ice like this. It was just so tedious and exhausting. And I thought it was going to take 12 hours. I took this photo 18 hours in, and we found one spot where we could stand there and dig a little hole for the stove. We couldn't sit down. There wasn't enough room to sit down, but we could at least not knock the stove off. And that's what I was trying to say about earlier, about even though these routes aren't technically that hard, to do them in this style where the warmest jacket I had was a Patagonia puffball pullover, you know, and this teeny little pack. You know, one thing goes wrong, you're kind of like, got to deal with it. So there's all this emotional and intellectual sort of effort. And this thing took everything I'd learned on all those other epics, Fitzroy, Jack Tackle, and I had this major epic on Fitzroy with the stove and all these other things that I'd learned, you know, I put them all together to succeed. It's the only way we succeeded on this route in this style. I'm sure someone today who's really fit could probably, you know, solo it in, you know, a few hours or something. But there's sort of, you know, right there is when, you know, we were 24 hours, it took us 24 hours to get to that spot right there, the top of that red line. And then there was all this mixed climbing through the exit in this major storm. And it took about, you know, and then, so we got to the top and we had to come down this north ridge. And then here's the kind of the wallowing.
Oh my gosh.
That plateau. And we got down 35 hours later or something. This is what I look like. We were poached. David had this going on. So, you know, we had to leave. But so here I am going up I'm walking up the glacier. You can see our skis right here.
Mm-hmm.
There I am walking up below the face. So just for a sense of the scale, see that rock right there that I've circled?
Yep.
There it is there.
Oh my gosh.
So it gives you a sense of the scale. But so anyway, then we drove home. We drove back to Calgary. I drove home. I was gone from Bozeman for 2 weeks. So people get inspired. You don't need a whole summer to do an expedition. You know, we basically, two of the best routes I've ever done. Probably no one knows about them, but you know, 2 weeks round trip from Bozeman. So get after it. No excuses.
No excuses.
So here's the two routes here.
Oh, that's awesome.
So 2005, we did that. May of 2005.
Just want to remind everyone, you know, we're entering the section of the conversation. We'd love you to submit some questions to ask JoJo. We will be bringing JoJo back in the fall. I mean, there's endless content and just kind of recording of history that's important to me and important to us at MMA for, you know, our community. So
Well,
please submit any questions you might have.
yeah, and what I did though since then is I brought that mentality back to the Beartooths too. Like, so my favorite thing in the universe is to leave a trailhead in the Beartooths somewhere. Like, I remember one trip I left here and I was living in Livingston, I think at the time. I had dinner with my dad in Big Timber, went to Red Lodge, left the West Fork trailhead at like 10:30 at night, walked all night. I was on the summit of Bowback Mountain at 5 a.m.
Wow.
Bagged a couple more peaks in that area, and then tried to take a nap somewhere along the way. Mosquitoes chased me out, and then I kind of slogged out late Saturday, and had Sunday to recover. But it's like a long weekend, you know.
Yep.
And so I've done that with Granite Peak multiple times, you know, different routes on Granite Peak where I just go super light, just don't stop. I don't go really fast, but I don't stop, you know. And so I'm not doing anything really hard. So I don't have to carry a lot of gear. So a lot of my climbing friends don't like it because it's not technical enough, right? You know.
I can't wait to go out and go look at some of those Beartooth glaciers and maybe do some of those coolars in the North Face.
Yeah, there's a ton of the snow climbing in the Beartooths. Like right now, starting now, it's early this year. Last year I did Whitetail Peak in late June. Like right now, it might be good. But
Yep.
Yeah, there's just a little window. You can go do that stuff. It's awesome. And then just, you know, so that's sort of how I approached my climbing was, you know, goes all the way back to the guy who taught me, don't lose your fear, and how I've translated that into this just sort of intellectual approach.
Absolutely.
Not that people that climb really hard don't do that too. It's just, I'm not much for training. I never have been, you know, I'm overweight, you know, whatever. I can't pull that hard. So I got to find other ways to stimulate my climbing itch, you know, and I get plenty scared.
Yeah. Well, don't lose that fear is a great mantra to still have from your early days. So I think that's really cool. I'm going to give one last, you know, request for any questions. You know, the beauty of this series is that we will post it online. This will stay on Facebook. Anybody who watches this can have direct contact to JoJo to ask questions. You know, but we really appreciate you engaging with us on this, and we just so appreciate your time on this.